At my sister's graduation, they all toasted. I got just a cold message, "We'll celebrate yours later." Later never came. Weeks later, my cousin posted a selfie, with me standing beside her, captioned, "The champagne bubbles caught the late afternoon sunlight streaming through Mom's dining room windows as everyone raised their glasses for what felt like the 100th toast of the day." Sarah's graduation from medical school was apparently worthy of endless celebration, endless speeches, and endless reminders of how proud everyone was of our family's first doctor. To Sarah, Uncle Mike boomed, his face already flushed from the afternoon's festivities. "The smartest girl in the family." I forced a smile from my spot in the corner, nursing my second glass of champagne and trying to ignore the familiar ache in my chest. Don't get me wrong, I was proud of Sarah. She'd worked incredibly hard through 4 years of undergrad and 4 more years of medical school. She deserved every bit of recognition she was getting. What stung was the complete dismissal of my own achievement. 6 months ago, I graduated summa cum laude with my master's in environmental engineering from Stanford. I'd spent 2 years researching sustainable water filtration systems for developing countries, published 3 papers, and landed a job with a prestigious consulting firm in San Francisco. My thesis advisor had called my work groundbreaking and potentially life-changing for millions of people. But when I texted the family group chat about my graduation ceremony, the responses had been tepid at best. "Congrats, honey." From Mom, followed immediately by "Can't wait for Sarah's ceremony." "Nice work, kiddo," from Dad. "Cool," from my younger brother Jake. And from the extended family? Radio silence, mostly. A few thumbs up emojis. My cousin Lisa had sent a private message, "We'll celebrate yours later." Sarah's is the big one, you know? Later never came. Now, watching Sarah beam as our entire extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents who'd flown in from 3 different states, showered her with praise, gifts, and promises of connections for her residency applications, I felt that familiar knot of resentment tightening in my stomach. "Emma." My Aunt Carol's voice cut through my brooding. "Come here, sweetheart." I plastered on my best smile and joined the group gathered around Sarah, who was holding up a stethoscope from our grandparents, apparently sterling silver and engraved with her initials. "We were just talking about how proud we are of both our girls," Aunt Carol continued, though her eyes never left Sarah. 2 graduates in the family this year. Although, of course, becoming a doctor is such a huge achievement. Sarah's going to save lives. "Emma's work is important too," Sarah said, and I felt a flash of gratitude toward my sister. At least she remembered what I actually studied. "Environmental stuff, right, Em?" "Environmental engineering," I corrected gently. "Water filtration systems for communities without clean water access." "That's nice, dear," Grandma Betty said absently, then immediately turned back to Sarah. "Now tell me more about your residency interviews, sweetheart." And just like that, I was invisible again. I excused myself to help Mom in the kitchen, but really I just needed a moment to breathe. The kitchen was empty, Mom having rejoined the celebration, so I stood at the sink and watched the bubbles in my champagne rise and pop. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jenna. "How's the celebration going? Are you okay?" I confided in Jenna about the family's lukewarm response to my graduation, and she'd been appropriately outraged on my behalf. "It's complicated," I texted back. "I'm happy for Sarah, but it would be nice if anyone remembered that I accomplished something too." "Your accomplishment is huge," she replied immediately. "You're literally going to help provide clean water to people who need it most. That's incredible, and anyone who doesn't see that is an idiot." I smiled at her loyalty, but the hurt remained. These weren't strangers dismissing my work, this was my family. The party continued for another 3 hours. I watched as Sarah opened gift after expensive gift, a new laptop from our parents, a designer briefcase from the aunts and uncles, jewelry from various cousins, and a check from Grandpa Joe that made her eyes widen when she peeked at the amount. When people started asking about photos, I dutifully smiled and posed in the family pictures, but I noticed how I was consistently positioned on the edges, while Sarah remained at the center of every frame. The final straw came during the group photo on the back porch. Uncle Mike was directing everyone's positions when he gestured at me dismissively. "Emma, maybe you could step back a bit. We want to make sure we get Dr. Sarah front and center." Dr. Sarah? She wouldn't officially be called that for another few weeks when she started her internship, but apparently the family had already made the transition. I stepped back as requested, but something inside me shifted. I was done being the forgotten sister, the afterthought, the one whose achievements were always overshadowed by Sarah's more traditionally impressive career path. The party finally wound down around sunset. As people began to leave, they made sure to give Sarah one final congratulations, one final hug, one final promise to stay in touch as she began this exciting new chapter. I got polite goodbyes and a few "good job on your thing too" comments that felt like afterthoughts. After we'd cleaned up and Sarah had gone upstairs to FaceTime her medical school friends about the party, I found myself alone with Mom in the living room. "It was a good party," I said carefully. "Oh, it was perfect," Mom gushed. Sarah looked so happy. I'm just so proud of her. A doctor in the family. Can you believe it? What about me, Mom? The words came out before I could stop them. Mom looked confused. What about you, honey? I graduated too. 3 weeks ago. Summa cum laude. From Stanford. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. Of course, sweetheart. We're proud of you too. But her tone was distracted, dismissive. It's just that Sarah's achievement is so significant. She's going to be saving lives, Emma. It's different. There it was. The truth I'd been trying not to acknowledge. In my family's eyes, my master's degree, my research, my job offer, none of it mattered because it wasn't medicine. It wasn't prestigious enough, traditional enough, impressive enough. Right, I said quietly. Different. I went to bed that night feeling hollow and determined in equal measure. Something needed to change, but I wasn't sure what or how. The answer came 3 weeks after Sarah's graduation party, in the most unexpected way possible. I'd been working at the consulting firm for about 4 months at that point, doing good work but feeling somewhat unfulfilled. Then I was sent to a conference in Denver, presenting my research on low-cost water filtration to a room full of engineers, public health officials, and NGO representatives. My presentation had gone well, really well, actually, and I was networking during the coffee break when a woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Emma Rodriguez?" she asked. "I'm Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the WHO. The World Health Organization." My heart started beating faster. "I am," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Your presentation was remarkable," she continued. "We've been looking for exactly this kind of innovative, cost-effective solution for our water initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership?" For the next hour, Dr. Walsh and her colleague Dr. Ahmed Hassan outlined an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. The WHO wanted to fund a pilot program using my filtration system in 3 countries, Kenya, Ghana, and Senegal. If the pilot was successful, they'd scale it across additional regions. "The potential impact is significant," Dr. Hassan explained. "We're looking at potentially providing clean water access to several million people initially, with a possibility of much larger scale implementation if the pilot succeeds." I somehow managed to stay professional during the meeting, but inside I was reeling. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of career-defining moment that most people only dream about. And it was happening to me. The forgotten sister. The one whose achievement wasn't significant enough to celebrate. I called Jenna the moment I got back to my hotel room. "Emma." She screamed when I told her the news. "This is incredible. You're going to be changing the world." "I can't believe it's real," I admitted. "They want me to fly to Geneva next month to finalize the details and meet with the full team. You have to tell your family. They're going to be so proud." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to share this news, to finally have something that would make them sit up and take notice. But another part of me, the part that was still hurt by their dismissal, wanted to wait. "I think I'll hold off for a bit," I told Jenna. "Make sure everything's confirmed first." What I didn't tell her was that I was also curious to see how long it would take my family to ask me about my new job, my life, anything about me at all. The answer, it turned out, was not at all. Over the next month, our family group chat was filled with updates about Sarah's residency program, photos from her first day at the hospital, complaints about her call schedule, and endless encouragement from everyone. Meanwhile, I'd gotten exactly one message asking how my new job was going, from Sarah herself. I'd started my new position at the consulting firm right after graduation while simultaneously developing my collaboration with the WHO team. My days were packed with meetings, research, travel preparation, and the most engaging work I'd ever done. I was happier and more fulfilled than I'd ever been, splitting my time between commercial projects and the pilot program preparation. But my family had no idea. The breaking point came during our monthly family Zoom call in October. I'd just returned from my first trip to Geneva, where I'd presented my preliminary results to the WHO Technical Committee. The pilot program was showing promising early results, and Dr. Walsh had mentioned that they were considering expanding to additional countries if the current sites continue to perform well. I was exhausted but exhilarated as I logged into the family call. "Emma," Mom said when my video appeared. "There you are. We haven't heard from you in ages." "I've been traveling a lot for work," I said. "That's nice, dear. Sarah, tell everyone about what happened in the ER yesterday." And just like that, the conversation shifted to Sarah's latest medical drama, a difficult patient, and her supervising physician's praise. I listened with half an ear while checking emails from my team in Nairobi. "Emma, you're awfully quiet," Dad commented at one point. "Just tired," I said. "Work's been intense." "Well, that's good," he replied absently. "Sarah, what were you saying about your rotation schedule?" When the call ended an hour later, I realized that despite being on camera for the entire time, no one had asked me a single follow-up question about my work, my travels, or my life. That's when I decided it was time for a little experiment. My cousin Lisa had always been the family's social media queen, documenting every family event, every milestone, every gathering with carefully curated posts that generated dozens of likes and comments. She was also someone who prided herself on being in the know about everyone's business. Lisa lived in San Francisco, about 20 minutes from my office. She'd mentioned several times that we should grab lunch, but somehow we never did. She was always too busy, or I was traveling, or Sarah was visiting and took priority. But now I had an idea. I reached out to Lisa and suggested we meet for coffee that weekend. She seemed surprised but pleased. "I'd love to catch up." She texted back. "I feel like I never see you anymore." We met at a trendy cafe in the Mission District on Saturday afternoon. Lisa arrived with her phone already in hand, taking photos of her latte for her Instagram story. "Emma, you look great," she said, giving me a quick hug. "How's the new job going?" Finally, someone asked. "It's been incredible, actually," I said, settling into my chair. "I just got back from Geneva last week." "Geneva? Wow, fancy. What were you doing there?" I took a sip of my coffee and chose my words carefully. "I've been working with the World Health Organization on a water filtration project. We're implementing pilot programs in Kenya, Ghana, and Senegal." Lisa's eyes widened. "Wait, the World Health Organization? Like, the actual WHO?" "Yep. They approached me after seeing my research from Stanford. We're developing sustainable water filtration systems for communities without clean water access." That's amazing, Emma. How many people will this help?" "The pilot programs are targeting about 2 million people initially. But if everything goes well and we get approval for the full-scale program, we could potentially help tens of millions of people across multiple continents over the next decade." Lisa nearly choked on her latte. "Tens of millions? Emma, that's huge. This is incredible. Why didn't you tell anyone?" I shrugged, going for casual. "I don't know, I guess I wanted to make sure everything was solid before making a big deal about it. You know how these things can fall through. But this is such a big deal. You're literally going to be saving lives, providing clean water to people who need it most. This is like world-changing stuff." "I hope so," I said modestly. "It's definitely the most meaningful work I've ever done." We chatted for another hour, with Lisa asking increasingly detailed questions about the project, my travel, and my role. I could see her excitement growing, and I knew exactly what was happening. She was already planning how to share this news with the family. As we prepared to leave, Lisa insisted on taking a selfie together. "I need to document this," she said, holding up her phone. "My cousin, the world changer." I smiled genuinely as she snapped several photos, then watched as she immediately began crafting an Instagram post. "What are you writing?" I asked innocently. "Just bragging about my amazing cousin," she said, fingers flying across her screen. "Everyone needs to know what you're doing." Perfect. The post went live 20 minutes after we parted ways. I wasn't following Lisa's Instagram, but Jenna was, and she immediately sent me a screenshot. The photo showed Lisa and me smiling at the cafe, but the caption was what made my heart race. "Coffee date with my brilliant cousin Emma. Just found out she's working with Yahoo to bring clean water to millions of people in Africa." Africa emoji, droplet emoji. While we were all celebrating Sarah becoming a doctor, which is amazing too, Emma was quietly changing the world with her groundbreaking engineering work. The pilot program could potentially scale to help tens of millions. So proud to be related to someone making such an incredible impact. #ProudCousin, #changing the world, #clean water, #WHO. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments. But more importantly, my phone started buzzing with notifications. First came the text, "Mom, Emma, Lisa just posted something about you working with the World Health Organization. Is this real?" "Dad, call me immediately. What's this about the WHO?" "Sarah, OMGM. Why didn't you tell us about this? This is incredible." "Uncle Mike, Emma, I just saw Lisa's post. Is it true you're working with the WHO? That's amazing. Aunt Carol, honey, I'm so confused. Are you really helping 50 million people get clean water? Why didn't we know about this? Jake, dude, are you famous now? Lisa's post is blowing up." Then came the Facebook notifications as various family members shared Lisa's post with their own captions of pride and amazement. My phone rang within 2 hours. It was Mom. "Emma Christine Rodriguez," she said, using my full name like she had when I was in trouble as a child. "You need to explain to me right now why I had to find out from Lisa's Instagram that my daughter is working with the World Health Organization." "Hi, Mom," I said calmly. "How are you?" "Don't how are you me, young lady. I want to know everything. Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the conference, about Dr. Walsh approaching me, about the Geneva meetings, about the pilot programs, about the early promising results and the potential to scale across multiple continents if everything continued to go well. With each detail, I could hear her amazement growing. Emma, this is incredible. This is huge. Why didn't you tell us? I tried to, Mom. Remember at Sarah's graduation party when I mentioned my environmental work? Aunt Carol said it was niece and then immediately changed the subject back to Sarah. And I did tell you about getting the job at the consulting firm, but no one really asked about what the work involved. There was silence on the other end of the line. And at the family Zoom calls, I continued, everyone's always so focused on Sarah's residency stories that there's never really space to talk about anything else. Plus, the WHO partnership is still relatively new. I didn't want to announce it until I was sure it was going to work out. But Emma, this is the World Health Organization. This is you helping 50 million people. This is what, Mom? Another pause. This is the kind of thing we should have celebrated. Yes, I said quietly. It is. Over the next few days, my phone didn't stop ringing. Every family member who had barely acknowledged my Stanford graduation was suddenly calling to congratulate me, to express their amazement, to ask why I hadn't told them sooner. Grandpa Joe called to tell me he was more proud than words could express and wanted to know if there was anything he could do to help. Grandma Betty sent a card with a handwritten note about how she'd always known I was destined for great things. Uncle Mike left a voicemail saying he'd been bragging about me to all his golf buddies. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were the same people who had dismissed my environmental stuff just months earlier. The most interesting call came from Aunt Carol. Emma, honey, she said, her voice unusually subdued. I owe you an apology. You don't need to, I started. Yes, I do. I've been thinking about what I said at Sarah's party, about your work being nice. I had no idea what you were actually doing, and I should have asked. I should have been interested. I should have celebrated your graduation properly. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. It's just that when someone says environmental engineering, I think about, I don't know, testing soil or something. I had no idea you were developing life-saving technology. I'm sorry I dismissed something so important. But not every conversation was as straightforward as Aunt Carol's apology. Some family members seemed to struggle with a sudden shift in my status from quiet, smart Emma to Emma who's working with the World Health Organization. My cousin Mark called a few days after Lisa's post went viral in our family's circles. Mark had always been the golden boy on Dad's side of the family, star athlete in high school, successful in real estate, married to his college sweetheart with 2 picture-perfect kids. He'd never been unkind to me, but he'd also never shown much interest in what I was doing. So, Emma, he said after the initial congratulations, this WHO thing. It's really as big as Lisa made it sound? It's a significant opportunity, I replied carefully. I could hear something in his tone that I couldn't quite place. I mean, 50 million people. That seems like a pretty big number to throw around. Are you sure that's accurate? There it was. Doubt. He was questioning whether I was being truthful about the scope of my work. Mark, I'm working directly with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who heads the WHO's Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Program. The 50 million figure comes from their demographic analysis of the regions we're targeting. I can send you the official documentation if you'd like. No, I'm not saying you're lying, he backtracked quickly. It's hard to believe that our Emma is suddenly working on something so international. Our Emma. As if I'd been frozen in time as the quiet 12-year-old who preferred books to family gatherings. I've been working toward this for years, Mark. My master's thesis was on sustainable water filtration. I published papers on it. Stanford isn't exactly community college. Right, of course. I just meant, well, you've always been so modest about everything. If I was working with the WHO, I'd be shouting it from the rooftops. And there was the real issue. In Mark's mind, truly important achievements came with fanfare and self-promotion. Because I hadn't been broadcasting my success, he'd assumed it wasn't worth broadcasting. I prefer to let the work speak for itself, I said. Yeah, well, maybe you should speak for yourself a little more. None of us had any idea you were doing anything this impressive. After I hung up, I found myself reflecting on that conversation. Mark wasn't wrong, I had been modest to a fault. But his suggestion that I should have been more self-promotional missed the point entirely. I shouldn't have needed to shout my achievements from the rooftops to get basic respect and interest from my own family. The conversation that really threw me came from my grandmother's sister, Great Aunt Helen, who called me from Florida where she'd retired. Emma, dear, she began in her tremulous voice, I saw the pictures that Lisa posted, and I have to ask you something. Of course, Aunt Helen. What is it? Are you sure you're not exaggerating about this water project? I mean, 50 million people sounds like an awfully big number for one person to help. I took a deep breath. Aunt Helen, I'm not working alone. I'm part of a larger team at the WHO, and my consulting firm is also involved. My contribution is the filtration technology itself and the technical implementation strategy, but there are dozens of people involved in funding, logistics, community outreach, and program management. Oh, she said, sounding almost disappointed. So you're not really in charge of the whole thing? I'm the lead engineer for the technology development, which means, it's just that Lisa made it sound like you were single-handedly saving all these people. If you're just part of a team, well, that's different, isn't it? I felt my jaw clench. Aunt Helen, most major humanitarian efforts are team efforts. That doesn't make individual contributions less significant. Besides, the core technology that makes this whole program possible came from my research at Stanford. Of course not, dear. I just don't want the family getting too excited if this isn't as big as we thought. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling frustrated and oddly deflated. Here I was, having achieved something I'd dreamed about since graduate school, and my own family members were either doubting its validity or trying to diminish its importance. I called Jenna to vent. Are you kidding me right now? She said after I told her about Mark and Aunt Helen's reactions. Emma, you're working with a freaking World Health Organization on a project that could change millions of lives, and your family is worried you might be exaggerating? I think some of them are having trouble reconciling their image of me with what I'm actually accomplishing, I said. Their image of you? What image is that? You know, quiet Emma, modest Emma, the one who never makes a fuss about anything. The one who lets Sarah be the star of the family. Well, maybe it's time to update that image, Jenna said firmly. You've been letting people underestimate you for so long that now they can't believe you when you tell them the truth about what you've achieved. She was right, but the realization was unsettling. Had I been so concerned with being humble and not threatening anyone that I'd actually trained my family to dismiss my accomplishments? The answer came during a particularly uncomfortable dinner with my parents the following weekend. I'd driven up to visit them, partly because I missed them and partly because I wanted to have a real conversation about everything that had happened since Lisa's Instagram post. Mom had made my favorite meal, her famous lasagna, and both parents seemed genuinely excited to hear about my work. But as I described the technical aspects of the filtration system and the implementation challenges we were facing in different regions, I noticed Dad's eyes glazing over. This is all very impressive, sweetheart, he said, cutting me off mid-explanation, but I have to admit, I don't really understand most of what you're saying. What part would you like me to explain differently? I asked. Well, all of it, really. The technology stuff goes right over my head. Can you just tell us the basics? Like, what do you actually do all day? I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and realized something that should have been obvious years ago. They had never actually tried to understand my work. Not in college, not in graduate school, not now. They'd been content to smile and nod and assume that whatever I was doing was fine, but they'd never invested the mental energy to actually comprehend what my career involved. Dad, I said slowly, do you understand what Sarah does all day at the hospital? Of course, he replied immediately. She sees patients, diagnoses illnesses, treats people who are sick. She saves lives. And you understand that because you've asked her about it, right? You've listened when she's explained medical procedures, you've learned the terminology, you've shown interest in her cases. Well, yes. It's important to understand what your daughter does for a living. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Dad, I've been trying to explain my work to you for years. Every time I mention water filtration systems or sustainable technology or community implementation, you tune out because it sounds too technical. But Sarah talks about medical procedures that are just as complex, and you make an effort to follow along. My parents exchanged glances. That's different, Mom said weakly. How is it different? Another long pause. Medical stuff affects us directly, Dad said finally. We might need a doctor someday. But water filtration? That's something that happens far away, to people we don't know. And there it was. The real reason my family had dismissed my work for so long. It wasn't that engineering was inherently less important than medicine, it was that my specific type of engineering helped people they couldn't relate to, in places they'd never been, solving problems they'd never experienced. Sarah's work was immediate, relatable, and directly relevant to their lives. My work was abstract, distant, and seemed irrelevant to their day-to-day existence. Dad, I realize now that I could have been clearer about the potential applications of my work. But when I mentioned developing water filtration systems, I was talking about technology that could literally save lives by preventing waterborne diseases. The fact that it's happening in other countries doesn't make it less important. He looked uncomfortable. I'm not saying one is better than the other. No, but you're saying one is more worth your attention than the other. And you've been saying that my entire adult life. The dinner continued, but the conversation had shifted into more careful, apologetic territory. My parents clearly hadn't realized how their differential treatment had affected me, and they were struggling to process the idea that their quiet daughter had been doing world-changing work while they weren't paying attention. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a pattern in how different family members were responding to the news about my work. The reactions seemed to fall into several categories. First, there were the genuinely apologetic ones, like Aunt Carol and my parents, who recognized that they'd failed to show proper interest and were making real efforts to understand and support me now. Second, there were the doubters, like Mark and Aunt Helen, who seemed unable to believe that modest, unassuming Emma could be involved in something so significant. Third, there were the ones who tried to claim they'd always known I was destined for great things. Uncle Dave fell into this category, calling me up to tell me he'd always known I was special and had always believed I would do something important with my life. "I remember when you were little," he said during one particularly cringy phone call, "you were always so smart, always asking questions about how things worked. I told your mother back then that you were going to be a scientist." The revisionist history was almost insulting. Uncle Dave had barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings, let alone predicted my future success. But the fourth category was the most interesting: family members who seemed to be experiencing genuine cognitive dissonance as they tried to reconcile their previous dismissal of my work with its actual significance. My cousin Jennifer fell into this group. She called me about a month after Lisa's post, and the conversation was fascinating in its awkwardness. "Emma, I've been thinking about what you're doing with the water thing," she began. "The WHO partnership?" I clarified. "Right, that. And I have to ask, why didn't you tell us it was such a big deal?" "Jennifer, I did tell you. At Sarah's graduation party, remember? You asked what I was doing for work, and I explained that I was developing water filtration systems for communities without clean water access." "Right, but you didn't say it was for the World Health Organization." "Because it wasn't, at that point. The WHO reached out to me after seeing my research. But the work itself, the technology, the goal of helping people get clean water, that was always the same." But you made it sound so casual. Like it was just a regular job?" "Jennifer, what would have been different if I'd said I'm hoping to eventually work with international organizations on water access issues? Would you have been more interested?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think I would have," she admitted. "I think we all would have." And that was the heart of the matter. My family hadn't dismissed my work because they thought engineering was less important than medicine. They dismissed it because I hadn't packaged it in a way that immediately signaled its importance to them. But that realization raised an uncomfortable question: why should I have had to market my achievements to my own family? Why wasn't their default assumption that whatever I was working on was probably meaningful and worth understanding? I discussed this with my therapist, Dr. Martinez, whom I'd started seeing after the whole family drama began to affect my sleep and concentration. "It sounds like your family has a very external validation-oriented view of success," she observed during one of our sessions. "They need outside confirmation, like the WHO partnership or Lisa's viral post, to recognize achievement. But shouldn't family be the people who support you before the outside world recognizes you?" I asked. "Ideally, yes. But families are made up of individuals with their own biases, insecurities, and limitations. It sounds like your family had trouble valuing what they didn't understand or couldn't easily categorize. So what do I do with that?" "Well, what do you want to do with it?" I thought about that question for days. What did I want? Did I want my family to grovel and apologize indefinitely? Did I want to hold their previous dismissal over their heads forever? Did I want to cut them off entirely? None of those options felt right. What I realized I wanted was something more complicated. I wanted them to understand not just what I'd achieved, but why their previous response had been hurtful. I wanted them to recognize the pattern of behavior that had led to this situation, so it wouldn't happen again, to me or to anyone else in the family. But mostly, I wanted to move forward in a way that felt authentic and healthy for everyone involved. This conversation was repeated, in various forms, with almost every family member. They all had excuses. They didn't understand what environmental engineering meant. They thought my work was less urgent than medical work. They assumed I would have told them if it was really important. But the truth was simpler: they hadn't bothered to ask. The dynamic in our family shifted almost overnight. Suddenly, I was the one everyone wanted updates from. My work travel became a source of fascination rather than something to gloss over. When I mentioned upcoming trips to Nairobi or Accra, people wanted to know everything: what the conditions were like, how the filtration systems were performing, what the community's reactions had been. Sarah, to her credit, seemed genuinely thrilled about my success. "I'm sorry I never really understood what you were doing," she said during a sister-to-sister phone call. "I mean, I knew it was important work, but I didn't realize it was this important. You're literally going to prevent waterborne diseases for millions of people. That's incredible, Em." "Thank you," I said. "And I'm sorry if I've seemed resentful about your celebration. You deserve all the recognition you got. It's just that you deserved recognition too," she finished. "I get it. I should have made sure people paid attention to your achievements." It was a good conversation, one that left me feeling closer to Sarah than I had in months. But not everyone's response was entirely positive. Lisa, surprisingly, seemed a bit miffed that her Instagram post had become the catalyst for my family's newfound interest in my career. "I mean, I'm glad everyone knows how amazing you are now," she said during a follow-up coffee date, "but it's kind of crazy that they needed social media to pay attention to their own family member." "I know," I agreed. But your post really did change things. Thank you for that. It shouldn't have been necessary, she muttered. The strangest reaction came from some of my extended family members who seemed almost defensive about their previous dismissal. My Uncle Dave called to congratulate me but spent most of the conversation explaining why he'd been so focused on Sarah's achievement. It's just that being a doctor is something everyone understands, you know? When someone says they're a doctor, you immediately know that's a big deal. But engineering? Well, there are so many different types. We just didn't realize yours was the world-saving type. I wanted to point out that all engineering had the potential to change lives, that the distinction between world-saving and regular work was often just a matter of scale and visibility. But I bit my tongue. The family dynamic had shifted, but it wasn't entirely comfortable yet. There was an overcorrection happening. Suddenly everyone was fascinated by every detail of my work, asking questions that felt more like interrogations than genuine interest. At the next family Zoom call in August, I found myself in the unusual position of being the center of attention. "Emma, tell us about your trip to Kenya," Mom exclaimed as soon as I joined the call. "How are the water systems working?" Dad asked. "Are you going to be on TV?" Jake wanted to know. "Have you met any celebrities at the WHO?" Grandma Betty chimed in. It was overwhelming and, honestly, a little exhausting. This level of attention felt just as unnatural as being ignored had. Sarah, I noticed, was unusually quiet during the call. When someone finally asked her about her residency, she gave brief, subdued answers. After the family call ended, she texted me privately, "Can we talk?" I called her back immediately. "I'm happy for you, Em, I really am," she started, "but this is weird, isn't it? It's like the family has completely flipped. Now they're obsessing over your work and barely asking about mine." She was right. The pendulum had swung too far in the other direction. "I'm sorry," I said. "I never wanted your achievements to be overshadowed." "I know you didn't. And I'm not upset with you. It's just... Now I kind of understand how you felt. It sucks to feel invisible." We talked for over an hour that night, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. We discussed the family dynamics, the pressure we both felt to achieve, the strange competition that had developed between us without either of us really wanting it. "I think Mom and Dad always pushed us in different directions," Sarah reflected. "You were the smart one who was going to change the world with science, and I was the caring one who was going to help people through medicine. But that's such a false dichotomy." "Both paths help people," I agreed. "Both paths matter." "Exactly. And both paths deserve celebration." We made a pact that night to support each other more actively, to make sure our achievements didn't come at the expense of the other's recognition. The real test of this new dynamic came 4 months later, when Sarah passed her medical boards with flying colors and I received confirmation that the WHO was approving an expanded second phase of my water filtration program to include 5 additional countries. We had a joint celebration this time, Sarah's idea. She insisted that we share the spotlight, that the family recognize both achievements equally. The party was different from her graduation celebration. More balanced. More thoughtful. People asked meaningful questions about both of our work, and the conversation flowed naturally between Sarah's medical experiences and my engineering projects. But the most meaningful moment came when Grandpa Joe stood up to make a toast. "I want to say something about my granddaughters," he began, his voice carrying that authority that made everyone in the room quiet down immediately. "A few months ago, we celebrated Sarah becoming a doctor, and we did it right. She deserved every bit of recognition she got. But we missed something important. We missed celebrating Emma's incredible achievement, and we missed understanding the significance of her work." He paused, looking directly at me. "Emma, your grandmother and I have been talking, and we want you to know how sorry we are that we didn't see your accomplishment for what it was right away. You're going to help 50 million people get clean water. 50 million. That's more people than live in most countries. That's not just impressive, that's world-changing." He raised his glass. "So tonight, we're toasting both of our remarkable granddaughters. Sarah, who's going to save lives one patient at a time as a doctor. And Emma, who's going to save lives by providing clean water to millions of people as an engineer. Both paths matter. Both achievements deserve celebration. And both of you make us incredibly proud." The room erupted in applause, and I felt tears prick at my eyes. This was what I'd needed all along, not to be the only one celebrated, but to be celebrated alongside Sarah, with equal recognition for different but equally valuable paths. Later that night, as the family was cleaning up, Lisa pulled me aside. "I'm glad that Instagram post led to this," she said. "Me too," I replied. "Although it's a little crazy that it took social media for my family to pay attention. Sometimes people need a wake-up call," she said philosophically. "Sometimes they need to see something from the outside to really understand what's been right in front of them." She was right. My family's initial dismissal wasn't malicious, it was a combination of ignorance, assumption, and the human tendency to value what we understand over what we don't. But the experience taught me something important about standing up for my own achievements. I'd spent so long being the humble one, downplaying my successes and waiting for others to recognize them, that I'd forgotten I had a voice in the narrative. 8 months later, when I was invited to speak at the UN World Water Day conference about the success of our pilot programs, I made sure to tell my family about it immediately. I didn't wait for them to ask, didn't downplay the significance, didn't assume they wouldn't be interested. I've been invited to address the United Nations World Water Day conference, I announced during our family call. They want me to present the results of our pilot programs in Africa and discuss the technical framework for scaling to additional regions. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, genuine pride, thoughtful questions, and offers of support. But more importantly, Sarah chimed in with news of her own. That's amazing, Em. And perfect timing, I just found out I got accepted to the fellowship program I wanted. We're both killing it this year. You both are, Mom said, and for the first time, her pride felt equally distributed. The UN presentation went beautifully. I spoke to an audience of world leaders, NGO representatives, and fellow engineers about the power of innovative, sustainable technology to transform lives. Our pilot programs had exceeded projections. We'd provided clean water access to over 800,000 people across the 3 initial countries in just 10 months, and the health improvements in those communities were significant and measurable. After my speech, I was approached by representatives from 3 different countries asking about implementing the program in their regions. The WHO team was already discussing expansion to Southeast Asia and South America. But the moment that meant the most to me came when I checked my phone after the presentation and found dozens of messages from my family. They'd all watched the live stream, and their pride was unmistakable. The message that made me smile the most was from Sarah. Just watch my sister address the freaking United Nations. I'm definitely the less famous Rodriguez sister now, and I couldn't be happier about it. So proud of you, Em. And the message that moved me the most was from Mom. Emma, I watched your speech 3 times. I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand what you were doing. You're changing the world, sweetheart, and I'm so proud to be your mother. But perhaps the most satisfying message came from Lisa, along with a screenshot of her latest Instagram post, a photo of me at the UN podium with a caption, "Still can't believe this is my cousin." From overlooked family member to UN speaker in less than 2 years. Sometimes the quiet ones are changing the world while everyone else is making noise. Emma's water filtration technology is now being implemented in 8 countries and has helped nearly 1 million people get access to clean water. #ProudCousin #UN #changing the world #quiet revolution. The post had hundreds of likes and comments, many from extended family members and family friends expressing their amazement and pride. But more importantly, it represented something that had fundamentally changed in my family's dynamic. I was no longer the forgotten sister, the afterthought, the one whose achievements were overshadowed. I was Emma Rodriguez, the engineer who brought clean water to millions, the woman who addressed the United Nations, the family member whose quiet work was louder than anyone had realized. The revenge hadn't been intentional, but it was complete. Not through malice or spite, but through the simple act of continuing to do meaningful work and eventually refusing to let that work go unrecognized. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at people who've wronged you, it's proving them wrong by succeeding so spectacularly that they have no choice but to pay attention. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that success can actually bring your family closer together rather than drive you apart. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful for that cold dismissal at Sarah's graduation party. It taught me to value my own achievements, to speak up for my successes, and to never again wait for others to recognize my worth. The girl who stood quietly in the corner while everyone toasted her sister is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her value, speaks her truth, and changes the world, one water filtration system, one UN speech, one proud family member at a time.